It all started with a very simple idea. Tell the stories of how successful middle market CEOs made it to the corner office. I'm Brant Handley, founder and managing director of Resource Options International, or ROI. We're the USA's premier executive search firm focused exclusively on empowering middle market companies to attract, hire, and retain A players while transforming top executives' careers and lives. ROI's Into the Corner office is dedicated to discovering how middle market CEOs advance their career, and we're making these remarkable and sometimes quite unbelievable stories available to you for the very first time. Listen and learn about the challenges they've overcome, the interesting people they've met along the way, and the lessons learned that steered these executives' unique journey into a middle market corner office of their own. I know you enjoy these CEO stories as much as I've enjoyed recording them. So thank you for listening today. And if you like what you've heard, rate us on iTunes or wherever you get your podcasts. I'm looking forward to you joining me on the next great middle market CEO adventure into the corner office. Today, my guest is Matt Blumberg, co-founder and CEO of Bolster. Bolster is a marketplace for on-demand executive and board talent for startups that was launched in April of 2020. Matt was chairman and CEO of ReturnPath, the company he founded in 1999 until its sale to Validity in 2019. ReturnPath was the market leader in email optimization, helping thousands of businesses use the email channel more effectively to promote and protect their brands, and winning numerous Employer of Choice awards, including number 2 on Fortune's magazine Best Companies to Work For list. Prior to founding ReturnPath, Matt was founder and general manager of the internet division of MoviePhone until the company's acquisition by AOL, and had previously worked in venture capital and management consulting. Matt has been recognized as one of New York City's 100 most influential technology leaders by Business Insider, by Crain as one of New York's top entrepreneurs, and by Ernst Young as an Entrepreneur of the Year finalist. Matt attended Princeton University, where he graduated Summa Cum Laude with an AB in urban planning in 1992. Matt Blumberg, welcome into the corner office.
Thanks, Brant. I'm glad to be here.
Great to have you here. We talked about a month or so ago, and I'm sure lots happened in the talent world as with you as with me. And I want to hear all about Bolster in a minute, but we always like to kind of start at the beginning and hear a little bit about our CEO guest's early life. Tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and what that early family life was like.
I grew up in San Diego, California, which is just about the nicest city you can imagine.
We share that in common. I think we talked about that.
Yeah.
Beautiful place.
It is a beautiful place. I love it out there. My parents are still there, so I get to go visit pretty regularly.
Nice.
I have one brother. I was an only child until I was 10. So I have one brother who's a full decade younger than me.
Wow.
And he and I didn't really end up, being close until he moved to the East Coast for college. He actually moved to New York City when I was living in New York City.
Ah, cool.
Otherwise, pretty middle of the fairway upbringing.
What did mom and dad do, or what brought dad to San Diego, or did he grow up there as well?
No, he did not. And I was actually born in Manhattan, but we moved out to California when I was 2. So I think of that as home. And his work took him out there. He was very, very early in the venture capital business.
Oh, kind of.
And
cool.
he had been working at a firm in New York. And one of the partners that he worked for split off and moved to La Jolla, California, and started a new firm. And
love it.
My parents thought that would be a nice place to raise a family, and they were right.
Yeah. And did you go to La Jolla High? Did you grow up in the confines?
I didn't.
Yeah.
We didn't move. My parents live in La Jolla now, but when I was growing up, we lived near San Diego State.
Right.
So it's sort of East County.
Yeah. Cool. And what were some of those early memories of growing up? Anything from dad that, maybe gave you that entrepreneurial streak that obviously you pursued for a few years, or, some of those early memories of things about his career?
Yeah, for sure. Both my parents were great role models in very different ways. And my dad's career took him from venture capital into entrepreneurship. So he actually started a company when I was about 10 or 11. And I remember a little bit about when he was a venture capitalist, because he periodically would get an interim, sort of emergency CEO assignment.
Yeah. Right.
And I remember some of those, but then I really remember when he started his company and sort of paying attention to that. And both my grandfathers were entrepreneurs as well, so I think it's probably kind of always been in the blood a little bit. Yeah.
Awesome. And what about mom? Did she work from the home, or did she help dad out in the entrepreneurial stuff?
No, she never worked with him. She was a mom, and then periodically did something. So she had been an elementary school teacher.
Right.
Then she did real estate for a little while. She did interior design and kind of started her own thing around that.
And then had her other son 10 years later. So
yeah, exactly. She had to start all over again.
Well, that's a nice break anyway. What about school? Were you a good student?
Yeah, I was kind of a geek.
What were your favorite subjects?
I really gravitated in high school to history, economics, politics, and government. I had a couple of phenomenal teachers that were real role models for me. Actually, a married couple that I had each of them several times in all of those subjects.
What were some of the lessons and things that you remember from their teachings?
Well, one thing I certainly remember was not to take yourself too seriously.
That's a good lesson to learn early
on. And I think with both of them, they always taught whatever subject they were teaching with a real eye toward current events and what was happening in the world and how it related to what they were teaching. And I think I probably learned from them and from other teachers at my high school, and it's certainly reinforced in college as well, the value of interdisciplinary learning, sort of combining subjects into sort of a broader view of something.
Yeah, cool. What about outside activities? You get involved in sports or chess club or music or anything like that?
Well, I was a terrible athlete, but I tried it. I did it anyway. I played JV football in my high school and JV baseball. And I remember my JV baseball coach said to me one day, well, you might not get them with your batting average, but you'll get them with your grade point average.
Well, that was good counsel, right?
But I did lots of things. I went to a fairly small high school, and so there were lots of leadership opportunities. I worked on the newspaper. I ended up being the editor-in-chief of the newspaper. I helped on the yearbook. I started a creative writing magazine. I started a community service organization. I did speech and debate, all kinds of things like that.
Yeah, cool, super cool. What about entrepreneurial things with that lineage of all those entrepreneurs in your past? Were there things that you did? You have the ubiquitous paper route or other things as a kid to make money?
Not really.
Yeah.
I did some entrepreneurial things, sort of in the context of school. Like I started a creative writing magazine, and I started I think I started in senior year a school store, but I didn't really do I wasn't one of those kids that was like, oh, I got the lemonade stand and I cornered the market on lemons.
Sold mistletoe at Christmas time.
Yeah.
Well, you went on to Princeton, and that's a big leap. I assume you were still living in the San Diego area. What made you choose Princeton?
I kind of always had a bug about going to the East Coast for college and trying something different. And
had you stayed connected there? I mean, did your family have relatives?
Yeah. Lots of grandparents and cousins and aunts and uncles, and we used to come back and visit a lot, so it was kind of familiar territory.
Sure.
But I was fortunate that I did well in high school and was able to get into an Ivy League school, and that kind of made an easy decision for me.
Great school. And you studied urban planning, I think, right? Isn't that what you got your degree in?
I did, which was purely a function of not being able to make up my mind in terms of what I wanted to study. It actually was not a major at Princeton, and I had a couple of different classes that I just loved, and a couple of them were in civil engineering, a couple of them were in politics. The public policy school at Princeton's very good.
Right.
A couple of them were in architecture and art history, and I literally couldn't make up my mind about which one of those things I wanted to major in. So I did what all good entrepreneurs do, and I made my own.
There you go.
So I applied to the school to create an independent major in urban planning. I grabbed faculty advisors from each of those departments, and I had a really wonderful cross-disciplinary experience.
Awesome. What did you like best about Princeton?
I had a great time in college.
It's a wonderful school.
Yeah, I mean, it's it's obviously one of the top schools in the country and the world. I had but I had a great time. I left there with, most of my good lifelong friends from college. But I think the thing that was probably most valuable about Princeton for me, I don't know if I liked it the best, but it was certainly most valuable, is um, I've never felt so dumb and average in my life.
Yeah.
And
Found a lot of smart people.
yeah, a lot of smart people. Right? So you show up on your first day, and inevitably in some orientation session, someone says, "Okay, raise your hand if you were number one or number two in your high school class," and every hand,
Everyone raise their hands. Yeah, exactly.
right? And it really, I think it helped me. It helped take me down a bunch of pegs, and it helped me. I think that just paid dividends for years, and
Right.
lots of other good things too, though.
What was the first job you took out of Princeton?
My first full-time job was management consulting, strategy consulting.
Yeah.
And I worked at a firm called Mercer Management Consulting, which is now called Oliver Wyman. And it was a great first job. I always say that it's a first job that I should have paid them for it, because although I worked many, 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 many hours, I worked very hard, I just learned a ton.
Yeah.
And it's kind of great entry-level business job.
Any urban planning work there at all, or was that
Never.
not even? Never.
That was never a thing. One college summer, I worked at in a real estate consulting group,
Right.
part of Price Waterhouse, actually, and that was kind of the closest thing I did to urban planning. Although even that was not really urban planning. So that was more of an academic interest than a professional one.
And you didn't really pursue any other real estate
No.
avenue, I think, during your career. So
No,
did you kind of determine you didn't like it?
No, it's just I never really approached my education as vocational training.
Right. Right.
And part of that is you go to a liberal arts school, and
Yeah.
unless you're interested in being an academic and you happen to love the field you're in and want to go for your PhD and teach and write, you sort of you take what you love and then you go do something else afterwards.
You said Mercer was a tremendous place to start. What were some of the key lessons you took away in those first couple of years of work?
Well, I think, and I tell this to early career people all the time, I think your first couple jobs, half of what you're doing is learning how to work.
Right.
And how to be a professional. And one of the great things about working in management consulting, and I think it's true of other service industries as well, is you really get schooled in how to be a professional in a hurry. And it's everything from, how to dress and how to answer the phone and how to write a good deck and how to deliver a presentation, how to communicate, how to analyze a problem. I mean, it's just a constant stream of learning.
Right.
And that's really what I appreciated about that first job.
Yeah. Yeah. Did you manage people in that assignment, or did that?
No.
Yeah.
No. I was, kind of junior guy there.
What was the first job that you had when you first started managing people?
So it was my third job. So I worked in consulting for a couple of years, and then I worked in venture capital for a couple of years, which was also, interesting part of the journey. But same junior person, individual contributor. And then I went to work at a company called Moviefone.
Moviefone, yeah, sure. Remember that.
Some people may remember if they've been around for a while.
We're dating ourselves, though.
Yes,
right
yeah, for sure. When I joined Moviefone, it was 1995, and Moviefone was a small cap public company that I always say it was sort of the internet before the internet.
That's right. Yeah.
So it was, it was an interactive telephone service before there was really a World Wide Web. I went there thinking I would do it for a year and get some sort of operating experience. Like I had been a consultant, I had been an investor, and then the plan was to go to business school. And I sort of got swept up in the .com, internet 1.0 tornado,
right.
And never went to business school. So I was at Moviefone. I was running there sort of started and ran the online business for the company. Every year, 95, 96, 97, 98, it just got more and more interesting, bigger and bigger and bigger. It's one of those things looking back on my career that I sort of feel very fortunate that I woke up one day at age 24 or 25, and I was running a top 50 web property at a time when no one knew what that meant.
Tell our listeners what movie phone did, because many of them probably have never even heard of it.
Yeah, that's probably right. So movie phone. So if you wind if you go back in the Wayback Machine,
back in the last century,
in the last century, back to the 1980s and early 1990s, the way that you found out what movies were playing where and when was you had two choices. You could buy a newspaper, or you could call an individual theater and invariably get a busy signal.
Right.
And there was the only way to buy a movie ticket ahead of time was to walk to the theater ahead of time.
There are people listening. They're going, "Oh my God, are you kidding me?" Is that right?
Right. And then they're saying, "Wait, how old are you?"
Yeah, exactly.
So movie phone's innovation, and again, I didn't start the company. There were some very talented entrepreneurs who had this idea of creating a branded, centralized phone number for each city. With an interactive touch-tone movie guide and advanced ticketing service. And that's why I say it was the internet before the internet. It was ad-supported, e-commerce, data.
I remember using it, calling in and then, finding which one, ordering the tickets online, on the phone, right?
Yeah, exactly, just on the phone. So anyway, I was very, again, sort of fortunate and lucky in my timing that I joined just at the dawn of the internet, and no one really knew what to do with me. I sort of convinced the CEO to hire me for a year because I was, allegedly smart, but I didn't have any experience. I had been a consultant and an investor, and he and his partner, both of whom have ended up being good long-term friends. Basically they had lunch with me and they're like, "All right, look, we can see that you're a smart person with some good general skills. We don't really know what to do with you, but we'll throw you in and see how it goes." And the first project I had was figure out what the internet is, and figure out what we should do with it. And then that is sort of
because it was just breaking. This was late 98,
early. No, this is early 95.
Early 95, yeah.
So and then everything sort of went from there.
Yeah, cool. And that first time you started managing people, in what capacity was that? Managing marketing for them, or product development, or what was your responsibilities?
Yeah, so I started there as an individual contributor, sort of special projects guy. And then when we decided that we were going to build a website, I kind of managed that project, but I wasn't really managing people.
Right.
And then once the website was live, I got put in charge of the web business and the website. And then I sort of got one direct report. And I feel so bad for her. Poor Elyse Robinson, looking back on it, I was just, I didn't know what the hell I was doing. No one was teaching me how to manage.
Sure.
I had not good management role models ahead of time. I think I probably drove her nuts. And then, I consider the next thing that happened in my kind of management career a very lucky thing, which is the business was growing so quickly that I went from having one direct report to getting a promotion, and we sort of centralized the internet operations, and then all of a sudden I had 30 people on my team. There was no intermediate step. Like I didn't go 1, 2, 5, 6, 7.
Yeah.
So I was forced to behave differently as a manager, because I could micromanage one person. Which again, if she's listening, I apologize to her.
We'll send it to her.
But you can't micromanage 30 people. So I was of forced to reevaluate how I
How did you do that? Did you seek some outside help, Matt, or were there mentors that guided you along? How did you take that huge, literally not an incremental, but a huge step change in management responsibilities?
It's a good question. I did not really have great management mentors. Mm-hmm. I had great sort of skill mentors, competency mentors, but management and leadership were not among them. So I feel like a lot of what I did at Moviefone and kind of learned at Moviefone was a little bit self-taught, maybe observation. I definitely, read like crazy and, read a lot of business books and business journals. Right. But I feel like the management and leadership part was a little bit more, sort of DIY or observation than
trial by error.
Than actually mentoring. Yes, it was trial by lots of errors.
Yeah. Got it. All right. And then, you spent the next couple of decades with Return Path. So tell us a little bit about the kind of the impetus around founding that, right? And then, growing that business for the better part of 20 years.
Yeah, so I had this great run at Moviefone for about 4.5 years. We, .com 1.0, we sold the company, the whole company, the internet part and the telephone part, to AOL at
Nice.
really at the peak of the .com frenzy.
Nice.
Back when, and AOL is another one that's going to date both of us,
Yeah.
but people have to think about
What
it
does
as
that
like
stand for?
that was right. That was the Google of its day.
That's right. Yeah.
At that time, and I didn't want to stay and be part of the very large
The big machine
of AOL.
Yeah.
And I felt like I had just had this experience of building a business inside of another company for 5 years, which is about as good a training ground as you can get for starting your own business. So I had a lot of energy around starting something, and really had a passion around culture and leadership and management. And I looked around and I saw so many businesses that were successful businesses, but that really didn't treat their employees particularly well and didn't get the most out of their employees as a result. And, I compared it to like, hey, all these companies that are running knowledge economy businesses, but they're managing their workforce the same way that you'd manage, the factory floor in the 1800s.
Right.
They didn't trust their employees. They micromanaged them. They policied them to death. A big part of why I wanted to start a business was I wanted to do that stuff differently. And I always joke that, I loved Return Path, and I think we had a great business. I can talk about that in a second. But I always joke that the company could have done anything, but that a huge part of it was, sort of a laboratory for me for management and leadership and culture. Yeah. I ended up with a couple of co-founders settling on solving a business problem or a couple business problems in commercial email, which again was just starting to take off in kind of late 90s. Right. And we built a big business over 20 years. It was 100 million in revenue. We had about 4,000 customers worldwide, and really helped a lot of clients solve problems related to email delivery, and email data and analytics.
Were your co-founders from Moviefone, or were there folks that you knew from Princeton, or just developed?
No, actually neither one. Sort of friend of friend kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then there was one co-founder, Jack, who's a current co-founder at Bolster as well. And then our other co-founder, the person we call co-founder, started a competing business around the same time that we started Return Path, and then we ended up merging the companies pretty early on. So the three of us were the founders there.
And you eventually sold the company. I think that's why you moved on, and I want to get to the Bolster transition in a moment. But
you did, yeah.
But before you actually had that transaction, how big was the company? What in terms of employees and approximate sales and customers you served?
Revenue was about 100 million.
Right.
I think we maxed out at about 500 employees.
Yeah.
We had 12 offices around the world, a bunch of international offices.
Nice.
So pretty reasonable scale for a startup.
Yeah. Did you think about going public at some point in time, or
did.
Was it always? Yeah.
Yeah, we did a couple of times when markets.
I mean, you started in December of '99, right? I mean, it was it's literally that 2.0 period of the internet.
We started in December of '99, and people were telling us to go public in March of 2000.
Yeah, right.
Which was crazy, and obviously not a sustainable way for public markets to behave. So we did think about that and kind of cultivate a lot of the things that you needed to do to be public over the years, but ultimately was never really the right decision for the business.
Yeah.
Running a public company is tough. Running a public company that is, less than a few $100 million in revenue is really tough.
Yeah.
And the stars really have to align for that to make sense. And it never quite made sense for us.
Right. So tell us about the decision to sell. Did that come out of the blue, or was it a partner? The Validity, I think, that bought you, right, in the end? Or
that's the name of the company that acquired us.
Right.
20 years is a really long time to run a tech startup, a venture-backed tech startup. And
so you were private equity owned. You were PE.
We were venture capital.
Venture capital.
Yeah.
Got it. Right.
Yeah, and in fact, we actually outlasted some of our funds that invested in us, and it was time. It quite frankly, it had probably been time for several years. We had a couple of almost transactions along the way, and but it was sort of obvious to everyone that the company needed to go through another pretty dramatic transformation.
Yeah.
And that either involved getting a huge new capital infusion or doing a bunch of M&A,
Right.
or finding a new home for the business, and that was sort of the calculus.
Was it hard to give up your baby?
Not as much as you would think.
I mean, he was 20 years old by then. I mean, by that time, he should have been launched from the household.
Exactly. I think part of it is that it had been 20 years.
Yeah.
And I was ready to go do something new. A bunch of us were ready to go do something new. And part of it was, was pretty intentional. Like because we had a couple of almost sales of the business over the years. I had really gotten my head around that, and I had seen lots of entrepreneurs go through the sale of their business, and some handled it well, and some didn't handle it well. And I have a CEO forum. It's a group of 6 of us that do sort of peer group and peer counseling, and had heard just so many stories from them over the years that I was really able to disconnect after we sold the business. I think my leadership team and I did a good job, and I'll give the guys at Validity who acquired the company really gave us a free hand in sort of wrapping things up in a way that gave us all closure. So we were able to say thank you to all of our employees and colleagues who had worked so hard with us over the years. We were able to really sort of wrap things up nicely. We called it the baton pass.
Right.
And that I think all helped with the transition.
So you took a breath for about 6 minutes, and then you went into a new startup and decided to launch it right at the beginning of the pandemic. So tell us a little bit about Bolster and how that came about.
Yeah, I wasn't sure if I had another one in me. And was kind of thinking about all kinds of career options, and the most important thing for me was, I made my list of like what must be true about the next thing I do, and there were 10 things on it. And the far and away the most important one was I really wanted to work with great people, and not just great people. I wanted to work with the people that I wanted to work with. And
as clients, as employees, as
well, in particular as employees and as investors. And so, in some respects, I never stopped talking to the same group of people. So there was, a sort of a core group of my colleagues from Return Path, and then my core investors from Return Path, and just kept ideating with them and thinking about, different things we could do, whether it was going into an existing business or starting a new business, and we got very excited about the space that we're in now at Bolster. Which was kind of a combination of things. First of all, we were very adamant, or at least I was very adamant. I did not want to do something else related to the last thing. Like 20 years of digital marketing, ad tech, martech, email technology was more than enough for a lifetime. and really wanted a kind of a new challenge and a new problem space. And the things that got me excited and that got our founding team excited were in and around talent and culture. Which had always been sort of a driving force for us at Return Path, but also really wanting to do something in the startup ecosystem. And as Return Path grew, and as we got more experienced and tenured and senior in our roles, we all spent more and more time mentoring other people. So whether it was formal mentor programs like Techstars and other accelerators, or just our VCs asking me and asking us periodically, like, hey, could you go talk to so-and-so in the portfolio? They're running into some problem that they've never seen before, and I know you've seen before. We really kind of enjoyed that aspect of the job, and we kind of wove a whole bunch of themes together into Bolster. We started working on it obviously before the pandemic. Our founding date was April 1 of 2020, so the pandemic was only a few weeks
Right.
old in the U.S. at that point and a couple months overall. And I think looking back on it, and I even said this at the time, I felt like 2020 was a really good year to start a business.
Yeah.
And the reason why, although the world was in chaos, right, those first few months of the pandemic, when you start a business, all you're doing, you're just heads down building.
That's right. Yeah, exactly.
So it was as good a time as any to be heads down and building, and
there weren't a lot of distractions.
Yeah, not a lot of distractions.
You weren't going to movies. We weren't going out to concerts or anything else.
Yeah. Well, you didn't have any customers to worry about.
You didn't have any customers to worry about either, right?
You didn't have employees to worry about. You didn't have a P&L to worry about. So,
right.
Tell
us a little bit about the model. What is it that you folks do?
Yeah, so we sort of look at the way that startups and growth stage companies access executive talent. And I know you're in the recruiting business as well, although I think you have a different customer set that you focus on. But we sort of look at the world of startups and executive talent and feel like there are a few norms that don't really make sense.
Yeah, very inefficient. Yeah.
One is that startups don't have a lot of money, but they need a lot of help.
Yeah.
So the traditional model of like, I got to hire a full-time senior executive for every functional department doesn't really work for startups.
Yep.
The second thing is, again, sort of back to money and also time. Using a retained search firm doesn't always work for startups because the process takes a long time and it costs a lot of money. Two things that startups don't have. And then finally,
I have my share of stock certificates.
Yeah,
so, most recruiters do.
Yeah, and finally, the other thing that kind of doesn't make a lot of sense for startups is when they need help with something, they email their board, their VC, a couple of friends,
right,
and they sort of get what they get. Like says,
right.
I know a guy that can do that for you.
Yeah.
So it's none of those
very
things,
incestual.
Exactly. None of those things point to comprehensive. They don't point to diverse. They don't point to
best practices.
Cost efficient. They don't point to agile. And that's really what startups need. So what we've built in our building is a talent marketplace. So it's an online marketplace. It works the same way that other online marketplaces work, whether it's Airbnb or Goat. But the thing that you can find as a CEO or as a hiring manager is access to senior executives.
Yeah, that's great.
And when you find them on Bolster, you can find them for all sorts of different uses. You can find someone for a full-time job, but you can also find someone to be a mentor or a coach.
Fractional project.
You can find someone exactly to do a project for you, to be a part-time executive. You can find someone to do a free 30-minute jam session about something. So there's sort of a Swiss Army knife of use of
that's great.
And that's really what we've tried to build into the platform.
And is compensation also flexible with regards to cash or stock or equity? And then
we're a marketplace, so we don't set the compensation. We match the buyer and the seller. But yes, people, we've done a few hundred placements at this point, and people have been hired under any model you can think of, from hourly to retainer to actual salary to equity only to all sorts of combinations.
And do both pay Bolster a fee to participate in the marketplace, or
it's free for executives? It's free to be in the marketplace, whether you're a buyer or a seller. The only people that pay us are clients when they hire someone through us.
The buyers, yeah. Cool. And how many employees today?
We have about 30.
Yeah, awesome. And national, international, regional, what's your scope?
With the minute you have something.com, you're global. Our team is all U.S. based, or largely U.S. based, and our business is really U.S. focused. But we have plenty of members and clients outside the U.S. and we match people outside the U.S. who just don't spend a lot of time cultivating that audience at this point.
Great idea. I have to say, you've really identified a need, because, I've seen that. I shy away from startups. I work with middle markets. I had a Goldilocks experience. I did startups. I did enterprise companies that did middle market, and I ended up, liking the chair that I sat in with middle market companies. But one of the biggest frustrations was with startups. You wanted to help them so bad, but they couldn't pay you. And, the stock certificates pile up, and, the opportunity for their success is relatively low, and you've really got to have that long-term commitment. So gotta
Yeah.
applaud it.
Well,
Fantastic.
we have
Success,
kind of a different model for working with really early stage companies than we do with later stage companies. I think later stage companies, you can call them a startup, but once someone's raised 10, $20 million and
Yeah.
they have, they have a management team and a board and VCs, they may look a little bit more like a middle market company.
Right.
With very early stage companies, we actually created a program called Bolster Prime that provides them with mentors on demand. Very specifically, it's not about hiring full-time execs. It's mentorship on demand, and for that they do pay us with a mix of cash and equity. So we're adding some stock certificates as well, but
Be careful there.
it's not the only way we get paid.
Yeah. Excellent, Matt. Love it. Well, talk a little bit about your leadership. How would you say it's shifted now? Are you running things differently, particularly given that it's a pandemic launch business? But would you say your style is modified? And if so, how over the years?
Yeah, I mean, my style has certainly evolved a lot over the course of a 30-year career, or whatever 25 years of managing people. I think I probably started off being what you would call a pace setter, right? Of just out in front and running as fast as I can and dragging everyone with me. I think that gave way to more of a consensus approach, which has some real positives, but also some real negatives. And then I think I learned from that to be generally more collaborative, which is probably my more of my comfort zone now, is sort of that collaborative as opposed to anything else. But I think the biggest thing that I've learned over time is actually great leaders are capable of showing lots of different styles at different times, depending on what the organization needs and what the people around them need.
So true.
And I wrote a blog post years ago called "Management by Chameleon," and there's some real truth to it. Like, I have people on my team who need to be managed and led differently from other people on the team, and you have to meet people where they are.
Yeah.
But then the organization also has different needs. If you look at the Ben Horowitz's great book, The Hard Thing About Hard Things, which is I think my favorite business book, or certainly favorite startup book. Sometimes your business is at peace and sometimes it's at war.
Right.
And the best peacetime generals or leaders are very different from the best wartime leaders.
Right. What do you look for when you're making bets on the people you invest in and hire at Bolster?
We have a small team, so and we're not adding to it very rapidly, so we're able to be very picky.
And these are people from Return Path, I presume.
There are a lot of them. I mean, we have 8 founders,
right?
And we kind of organized ourselves as a founding team of like, all right, we had all worked together for a bunch of years and wanted to continue to work together. And some of the other people in the organization worked at Return Path, but many of them didn't. And that's important to us as well, is to find new perspectives and new experience sets to bring into the organization. And I think when we're looking at bringing new people on, we sort of first and foremost want to make sure that we're hiring people who not just are smart, but who have real intellectual curiosity. That they're humble enough to know that they don't know everything.
Right.
And they always want to know more, and they always want to ask the question of why. So that's something we look for. There's another one, quite frankly, this is going to sound very basic, but when we're interviewing someone, we want to make sure that they've done their homework and that they come with a point of view.
Right.
Our business is not hard to understand. We're not inventing, cold fusion. We're in the people business, the talent business, the jobs business. Everyone understands that. And if someone shows up for an interview with us, whether they're interviewing for an accounting position or a product position or any position, they should have a point of view about what we do and why it's interesting to them and why it's not interesting to them. And I felt that way at Return Path as well, that if you're going to try for a job somewhere, do your homework, understand what goes on there.
Well, and alignment to culture is so important, I think, for both parties. One, the interviewer has to know their company culture and what to look for, but, the interviewee should also have a pretty good feel for the type of culture they want to work in and be able to ask those kind of questions to determine if it's the right place.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
and
you talked about.
When I interview people, I always give them half the time to ask me questions, and
Yeah.
it's a red flag when they can't fill it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Do you have, I mean, if you guys have a pretty good handle on culture, you talk about collaborativeness and cooperativeness. Do you have either a mission statement or a value statement that you guys
We
share?
we sure do. We are in fact kind of obsessed with that, and we were at Return Path as well. We had a very strong values-driven culture at Return Path, and the one here is, it has some things in common. We're the same humans, and usually humans don't change their values overnight, but we express them differently, and I think more simply. But yeah, it was actually one of the first things our founding team did was stake out 4 core values and then 4 what we call operating principles.
Right.
And those really drive how we work and how we make decisions. And they're very public on our website, and we train people on them, and we weave them into the fabric of our business and of our work. That is just front and center for us.
Awesome. Cool. Well, Matt, we're just about out of time, but we always like to ask our CEO guests, what kind of, career and life advice would you give someone that maybe, like yourself, wants to found their own company someday and create their own, corner office?
So I think I would say 2 things, and one of them is really tactical, and then one of them is more meaningful, but they're both important. The first thing is, I would say, learn how to write code.
Okay.
And I think that's that no matter what you do, and I'm not a coder, although I did learn when I was a kid how to program, one of the really early PCs in BASIC and Advanced BASIC. And maybe
I did Fortran cards at San Diego State, but that.
I think learning how to write code is really important because the world, Mark Andreessen says software is eating the world, and even if you don't write code for a living, having a good understanding of code and how code works I think is just critical for running a business. So that's sort of my tactical one. But my advice that I would give, sort of my younger self is to be as kind and as helpful as you can to as many people as you can. Early and throughout your career.
Comes back, doesn't it?
So there's a selfish end to it. Yes, it comes back to you. But it's also just
the right thing to do.
It's the right thing to do. It's a kind of a satisfying way to go through life.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Matt Blumberg, co-founder and CEO of Bolster, thank you so much for sharing your journey into the corner office.
Thanks, Brant.
Thank you for listening to Into the Corner Office with Brant Hanley. We hope you enjoyed hearing our guest CEO story as much as we did. If you want to hear more CEOs reveal their journey into the corner office, please subscribe via iTunes and tell your friends and colleagues. For more information about Brant, Resource Options International, and the mighty middle market, visit www.goforroi.com. We look forward to having you join us for our next episode.